a remarkable thing. Perhaps the most remarkable phone-in I ever did was, I think about a year and 18 months ago. I did it on the Radio 4 program called You and Yours. And it was a phone-in for people who had, as children, had their lives negatively affected by a drinking parent. They got more phone calls on that program than in any other of this is a consumer affairs program, You and Yours, that ever had. Most of them, and I was listening for the 45 minutes, most of them were people over the age of 50 who were still traumatized by the damage they'd experienced as a child from their drunken parents. It had never left them. And that was just so moving and so chilling. If you can't forget that kind of treatment as a child, it's a kind of abuse. It's not necessarily, it can be active, but it can be just passive. But having to, worry if you're going to come home and your mother's going to be dead or falling on the floor, it's very disturbing to the children.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's on a lot of people's minds. And I think that's why I got so many comments and views on this vlog, because I think it's something that's affected so many people, their own drinking, other people's drinking, and it's something they can't necessarily control. And they don't have a drug problem, so it's okay because everyone's doing it.
Well, this is why it's such an interesting drug.
Right.
Because apart from caffeine, actually, it may be more popular than coffee. I don't know, but it's the only really psychoactive drug that changes the way you think and feel that pretty much everyone has experienced. So and that's, for me as a scientist, is really interesting. So when I give lectures, I do this. I give lectures often about addiction to psychiatrists, and I say, let's look at the nature of addiction, right? Let's think about addiction. So how many of you drink? And 60, 70% put their hands up. How many of you are alcoholic? No one puts their hand up. And I say, well, isn't that interesting? Some of you are lying, but never mind. But more than that, it tells you that because we know that 10% of drinkers they're different. So we have a legal drug, the government endorses, and some people drink safely and some people don't. So that must be a difference in the person. It's not about will, it's about the fact that their body responds differently to the drug. And again, there's a lot about that in the book, trying to understand the vulnerabilities that people have, why some people actually lose control when they drink and others drink excessively to deal with problems like stress.
And what are some of those facts? You talk about having a drink diary in there. You talk about understanding how alcohol affects different people's genetics and different cultures. And what are some of the things you want people to understand?
Well, the first thing is I want people to understand that having a problem with alcohol is not your fault, because not everyone has it. So how can it be your fault? You're encouraged to drink it. The government allows advertising. It wants you to drink. You have a problem with drink. It's definitely not your fault. So the question then is, the first important thing is then, can you recognize you've got a problem? And that's where drink diaries are quite useful, because sometimes it's difficult to if you ask people you've got a problem, sometimes they'll be embarrassed to tell you, or you might get angry with them, and they might be scared you'll get angry. So, but keeping a drink diary is at least a way of beginning to get some sort of insight into what you're drinking. And actually, one of the great things about a drink diary is that you can then kind of give a score as to what the value of that drink was. Was that a really good drink? Did you get a great deal of pleasure? Did you have a really good dinner party? Or were you just drinking it because everyone else was drinking, you were bored? So that way you can potentially eliminate some of the drinking, which isn't giving you the pleasure that you want. That's the first thing.
Okay.
But the other thing is to really be very clear. Are you drinking to deal with something else? Because my view is drink is a great social drug. It's probably the most socially enabling. Certainly of the legal drugs, it's the most socially enabling by far.
Yeah.
And that's that I think is how we should use it. We should use it to facilitate social interaction and interchange and pleasure. But if you're not using it for those purposes, then almost by definition, you've got a problem with it.
And that was my story. I would drink alone. I would drink to get away from, I think, my own inner critic. I think that's what I was getting away, because I just needed a break from all the pressure I was putting on myself. So I would drink alone. And I would see people that could drink and have one drink and then go home. I'd be like, how do you even do that? Or drink once a week or once a month. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, because I couldn't, you know.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, so you just stopped, did you?
Well, to be really honest, David, when I started this show, I think a lot of alcoholics are isolated as well.
Quite.
And so that was a lot of me. I just felt isolated from the rest of the world. And this show got me really connected to the rest of the world and made me feel included and loved, and also depended on, and I was an example of. And by doing that repeatedly, I started needing the alcohol less and less and less, until finally I was like, you know what? I don't need you anymore, and I'm going to make a distinct choice that I'm not going to use it even as a minor crutch here and there. Yeah. So that was kind of my evolution. But that whole thing, it's not your fault. I mean, I remember going to buy a bottle of vodka from the corner shop guy, and he would be looking at me like, here you are again. And I'd be like, I hate myself right now. I hate how I'm being judged. I hate judging myself, but I still need to buy this thing. And that was, it was hard.
And it's what it's great you're sharing, and that's a very classic example of how the problem builds up.